Hey guys, Magnus Robert here, bringing you another Walking Dead lone survivor character video. Although the last survivor of this community becomes a lone survivor of sorts, I'm actually going to be looking at an entire community, that being the Viskocil Public Library community. I know I'm cheating a little bit here with my 10 episode lone survivor streak, but I can't talk about this guy without talking about the community that he's from. The last survivor of the library is of course male. He is played by Kevin Patrick Murphy. He is early to mid 40s and first appeared in Last Day on Earth. Nothing is known about his or his people's lives before the outbreak. Maybe they were librarians, but at some point after it began, he and his people began living and surviving in Viskocil Public Library in Virginia. Other than him, we have 4 other men and 1 woman, making at least 6 of them in total. Eventually, the Saviours found the community and subjugated them. It appears Simon was the lieutenant to this community. They were forced to give the Saviours half of their supplies under threat. However, one day, this guy right here decided to fight against the Saviours and fired a shot at them. Simon overpowered the library community and they surrendered, and the Saviours decided to hang the guy who made the first shot. Again, this guy. Likely instructing the community that they were not to remove his walker. You know, it was meant to be there as a reminder. As he reanimated and of course stayed there for a while. On another occasion, the library fought back again, but were all killed. By the look of the placement of the bodies, I think the Saviours literally just lined them up and shot them all. However, they kept one of the library's people alive. This guy. They beat him up a bunch and then likely allowed him to escape just for the fun of the hunt. In Season 6, the last librarian runs away from the Saviours as they chase him through the woods, whistling as they run after him. Exhausted, he is surrounded and falls over. The Saviours all make circles around him as he whimpers, afraid of what comes next. Simon, leading the crew that hunted him down, asks why the face and says he hopes the man doesn't blame them. They showed his people the way forward and gave them rules, and he recounts the events that led up to this, punching the library survivor in the face, knocking him to the ground. The man then begs as the other Saviours begin to beat him up and Simon watches on. Simon then drags the man to the road to wait for Rick and friends. The library man asks what this is and Simon says he is going to be made an example of. But the librarian points out that his people are dead, so an example for who? Simon doesn't give him a response though, he just kicks him, and the library man groans in pain. Rick and the RV crew arrive sometime after, and the library man is laying on the ground, but then he's kind of made to roll over onto his back when they park up. Simon explains the man is part of a group that resisted, and Rick shows off his big balls, talking smack to Simon. The spray paint saviour then shakes his little spray paint can and paints on the library survivor, giving him a big X. The library man remains on the road, almost unresponsive, as Rick and Simon continue to chit-chat before Rick and the RV crew drive off. Meanwhile, the bodies of the 4 library survivors killed by the Saviours are seen by Morgan, and after hearing the rattling of the librarian who fired that first shot, Morgan comes across him strung up. Morgan then climbs the tower and stabs the Walker librarian in the head, putting him down for good. He then cuts the body down. Off screen, the library survivor is eventually loaded up and brought to the bridge overlooking the roadblock, and then, to Rick's surprise, the Saviours do this to the library survivor. Hung by the Saviours, likely on Simon's command. The library survivor stays suspended like that for a while, until off screen he eventually reanimates. In Season 7, the library survivor's walker is seen when Negan drives Rick back to the roadblock. Rick stares off at the reanimated man when he stood on top of the RV, and when Negan shoots his gun up at Rick through the RV's roof, he's forced to jump off the RV and grab onto the library survivor. He swings there for a bit as the library man tries to take a bite out of Rick, but Rick is too heavy and eventually the weight of Rick tears the man's head off from his body and tumbles down below. A few moments later, Rick almost gives the library survivor's severed walker head a little kiss before he rushes off back to the RV. And that is the last we see of the library survivor. If he wasn't put down by another survivor, it can be assumed his head just remains in the grass located just under that bridge. RIP, the lone library survivor, the last of the librarians, and of course, RIP to the other library community members. The library community and the last library survivor are often forgotten about by the fandom and the show. I mean, this disproves Negan's people are a resources shtick because they wiped out an entire community here. And these guys did far less damage than Rick's group. Now, some may say this was all Simon, not Negan. Okay, then how come Negan never asks about the status of this community? Or were they just under Simon's command and Negan didn't know? If that's the case, Negan is just a crappy leader. Obviously, the point of this guy and his group is to show what could happen to all of Rick and his people if they continue to resist, and to really prove how brutal and powerful the Saviors are. Also, it's neat that his zombie comes back in Season 7. I like that. Anyway, tell me your thoughts on the library survivor and the rest of the library community, and I'll see you next week for another Walking Dead Lone Survivor video. Goodbye.